Welcome to the Human Athlete Podcast, empowering your life transition beyond sport, while celebrating the whole person behind the athlete. With your hosts, Kelsey Stockard, Steve Moore, and Jamie Comer, powered by Athlete Career Transition.
Hi, my name's Steve Moore. I am a former Welsh international rugby player. I'm the co-founder of Athlete Career Transition, and I am your host for today's episode of the Human Athlete Podcast. Today we're going to be talking to an amazing guy, a guy who I've known for over 5 years now. We've worked together on a number of different projects. He is the global leader for talent for EY, one of the top 4 professional services companies in the world, and he's been there for over 3 decades. And we're going to be talking to Dan about his experiences of business, where he's come from, what motivated him to be the businessman he is today, what he sees for the future. And we're importantly going to be talking about athletes and the EY and the program that EY run for female Olympians. It's a really interesting program. It's a program I know a lot about because I've been supporting it with Dan. And we'll be delving into what makes the right kind of individual to go into the EY environment and the skill sets that athletes bring to the fore when they're looking to be hired post-sport. But before that, I wanted to just add a little section of my own. It's going to be something that I run on my podcasts every time that I do one. And it's going to be transition tips, if I could say it, transition tips. I'm going to give the first couple for this podcast, but I'm going to invite listeners to send in their own transition tips, athletes who've gone through transition experts who can add their weight to the conversation, and potentially business leaders who have gone through their own transitions and can come up with some transition stories of their own, but also some tools and coping mechanisms when you're actually going through that process. And from my perspective, I work with athletes on a daily basis. I'm super, super lucky to do that. They're amazing people. And I work with great business partners as well that offer amazing landing spaces for athletes. And a couple of things that come up regularly when athletes first take on a new role with a business, whether they've just come straight from sport or whether they're moving from one industry to another or one job to another. One of the first feelings that athletes feel, because they're out of their comfort zone, they're out of their normal environment, is an overwhelming feeling of not being able to cope with the amount of information, the amount of learning, the amount of people that they've got to meet, learn, see, get involved in a very short space of time. So feeling overwhelmed is a natural instinct to have when you first walk into a new environment. And athletes are no different to that. And I think because they're so unused to that environment, potentially they've been in their sport for 10, 15 years, and they've helped create their own environment in that sport or through their sporting career. And they feel a little bit out of control, a little bit lost. And one of the biggest tips I can give around that is to look back on your sporting career, to drag all of those things that you learned as a sportsman and woman into your new reality. Because it will give you confidence, because you know that you can do these things. They're in there, they're in your psyche, they're in the back of your mind. If you've been preparing for an Olympics, if you've been preparing for a championship or a new season to start or a cup final, you know that you've had to prepare in a certain way, and lots of the things that you've prepared for and lots of the tools that you've used to prepare yourself for those eventualities, you can take with you into the new business environment that you're working in. So look back on your career in sport, not just with pride for what you achieved, but also the practical learnings and what you can bring with you that's going to be really useful, and it's going to give you the confidence to walk through that door, not only to be productive, but also to be successful and create a career pathway for yourself. So one of the things I learned very early on in my business career was to look back on my sporting career as a learning curve and something that could really springboard me into the next phase of my life. So take a moment to write down all the things that you learned that you may not even think are relevant, but I guarantee there'll be a good chunk of them that are. So write them down, talk to someone about them, talk to friends, talk to new colleagues, talk to your business leaders, and you may surprise yourself that you've got a lot more in the bank and a lot more in the locker than you thought you had, and you're not walking in completely fresh with a clean sheet of paper. So that's one tip. Second tip, networking, really, really important. So when you first join a new business, networking is key. Firstly, with the community that you're initially working closely with, so your work colleagues on a daily basis. Don't just get to know them in work, get to know them personally. Invite them for a coffee, invite them for a glass of wine after work, and invite them for a little bit of a lunch break, or even just a 15, 20-minute chat. And don't talk about work, talk about something else. Talk about what's going on in their lives. Have they got family? What are their sporting interests? What do they like to do outside of work? Lots and lots of people forget to engage on a personal level. And it's only when you engage on that personal level that you really find out about who people are. And sometimes why they react the way they do to certain circumstances in the workplace. And you can support them better if you know them better. So network very closely with those who you're working directly with, but also have a mind on the future. Look at what's going to happen to your career pathway, and who do you need to speak to. Lots of times we place athletes in businesses that are very large. They're global corporates, and it's a big organization to get to grips with. There may be different service lines. There's going to be different individuals, different egos, different characteristics. And it's really important that at some point you start to network with those individuals that you think are going to potentially offer you a pathway to success in your career, or offer you a new project to work on, open a door for you, and again, get to know them on a personal level. So I would say 2 tips for today. When you start to feel overwhelmed and you feel a little bit like a fish out of water, you're not. Look back on your sporting career, drag all those skill sets with you, and network. Really network hard. Get to know people, get to know personalities, and really put yourself out there to meet as many people as possible. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Okay, as previously mentioned on the Human Athlete podcast, my very, very first guest, a special guest to me, someone I've known for a number of years now. We've shared a few Amber Nectars together, and we've gone through a little bit of a business journey together, which we'll probably delve into a little bit later on. But more than anything, this person's become a friend as well over the course of time that I've known him. He's a family man, top of the order in terms of how you introduce this person. A huge family man, and that's one of the biggest considerations in his life. He's a reserve fire officer. I think I've phrased that correctly. He's a comedian, a fundraiser, and affectionately known by lots of people as Mr. EY. This man is the global talent attraction and acquisition leader for EY. He's been with the business for nearly 30 years, I think. Responsible for over 1,200 recruiters worldwide and for all of EY's global recruiting. So if EY goes down the pan, we know where to look. So without further ado, Dan Black is joining me this afternoon for my first podcast.
Steve, thanks for having me. It is great to be here. Great to hear you and be a part of this. I feel honored. I don't know who couldn't make it. I was the backup, but I'm glad they couldn't make it. I'm glad to be around.
You were the backup's backup. That's where you
right.
came in. No, seriously, I'm so pleased that you're with me today to talk about athletes and athletes in business. And I think the context of this is really to understand why business should be looking at athletes, understand the characteristics and the traits that athletes have that can be really impactful in business, and to learn a little bit more about some of the stuff that you're doing at EY, and really talk in detail about why that's an important project for you guys. But the first thing I want to do, Dan, is to let the listeners learn a little bit more about you as a person. And I think there's a big comparison between sportsmen and women and senior leaders in business. And the one thing that I kind of look at sometimes is that when you're a senior leader of a business, everyone in the business who's underneath you is a little bit afraid of you at times. There's a little bit afraid to come and knock on your door. A little bit of there's a bit of reticence in terms of engaging with that person. High-level sports people find exactly the same. They're up on a pedestal, and no one wants to engage with them on a human level. And you're a human like everyone else. You're a human like all the athletes that I know. And there's a man behind Mr. EY. And the one thing that I go back to before we talk a little bit about you, Dan, was an experience that I had in Rio just before you joined the program that we're going to talk about a bit later on in your new role. But we were in Rio with a wonderful lady, Nancy Altobello, who is affectionately known by both of us. And she was coming down to Rio to talk to some of the Olympians that we were working with and that we were introducing to EY. And we took Nancy for lunch with, I think it was 9 or 10 athletes, a number of which had just won gold medals. And, they performed amazingly well at the Olympics in Rio. And she was nervous. We were talking to her beforehand. She was nervous going to meet these athletes. She didn't know how to behave. She didn't know how to react to them. She didn't know whether she could touch their medals, whether she could talk about the Olympics. And for a woman of her stature, she was the global leader for talent at EY at the time. Myself and Andy, my brother, we were looking at this going, why is Nancy so nervous about meeting these, what we thought were ordinary people? Right. But she had them up on a pedestal, right? And at that lunch, I thought, I've got to break the ice a little bit, and I've got to help her understand that we're all real people around the table. We're not sort of, it shouldn't be standoffish. We should engage in the right way. And I told a story about when I was playing rugby, and it was my first cap for Wales. And I was coming out of the tunnel to go out onto the pitch, and I'd forgotten to put my shorts on. So I'm running out into the field without my shorts on. And I wore a jockstrap at the time, so everything was for there to see. And I got slapped on the backside by one of my teammates and told to get back in the sheds before everyone else saw me in all my glory, right? So I told this story at the lunch that we were at, and the athletes were aghast that I told this story with Nancy there. And Nancy was like, "Oh my God, he's told that story with the athletes." And ultimately, I said, "Listen, guys, we're all human beings here. Let's just have fun with this." And they all relaxed and they got into it. So what I'm trying to say, Dan, is I want to get to know you as a person on this podcast. So let's go back a little bit to little Dan.
Yep.
So little Dan, back in the day, many years ago. We're a similar age, so it's many years ago. Just tell me a little bit about your upbringing. What inspired you as a kid, and what gave you the impetus to want to go forward and be a successful human being, ultimately?
Well, thank you. Well, it's so funny because when I'm with you, I'm always little Dan, standing next to you and your brother and my athlete friends. But I have to say it's interesting because when people look at, particularly whether it's athletes or leaders or executives, what they see is that veneer, right? That the profile, the bio, et cetera. But I'm happy to say that, like so many others, I started in a much different place. I grew up in a small part of New York City called Staten Island. That is maybe not necessarily known worldwide for producing captains of industry, right? But growing up had a couple of really big advantages in that I had a great mom and dad, and a great family and friend system around me, but really not much else. I turned out to be we were first generation college students. My parents thought it was very important to learn work ethic early on, so I started working when I was 12, had my own paper delivery route. I would get up at 5 a.m. and deliver papers, and was told very clearly from day one that what was expected of me, certainly from my parents, was work hard, do the best at whatever it is that you're going to do. That's all we'll ever ask of you, and got supported, all the way through. That really, that really defined who I was from the go. I learned really early on what it meant to treat people well, regardless of what station they were at or what position they were in. I learned a lot of good lessons along the way, as I was working in those roles. But I also had this expectation of what I wanted to be, and when you're a kid, you're like, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be like a superhero or a professional athlete, all these great things. It was really great to have the guidance to say, hey, just be great at what you're doing, be proud of who you are, look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day, and if you can feel comfortable with what you've done and who you are, at the end of the day, and how you've treated other people, you've been successful. So modest beginnings, to say the least. I was told in no uncertain terms that I needed to go to university and I needed to figure out a way to pay for it. So I had to work hard at that. And played a lot of sport. I mean, let's talk about that. I played 3 different sports. One of which was football, or American soccer, but proper football was my main sport. I wound up playing collegiate football in the United States. Was a goalkeeper of all things, and that was another piece of who I was, Steve. There was so many lessons to be learned about leadership and teamwork and resilience that I picked up through sport. It was really one of the backbones of my upbringing, and really helped to guide me to make lots of other decisions later on in life. Not the least of which is who to surround yourself with or how to interact with people. And so that was a big part of my upbringing. And then really it was, coming from those modest beginnings, appreciating the hard work that it takes to get to any level of success. It was during that time in university that I started getting serious about what the rest of my life and career might look like. And you mentioned it at the top. I said, I don't care whatever I do. I want to be a family man first. I want to be a good human being first. And I was very actively seeking opportunities that were going to allow me to do those 2 things. And then, by the way, if I could be successful in business or whatever job, whatever, that's great. But I, it's one of the good things when people look back, say, what would you do different? What would you do the same? Keeping those priorities front and center of who I wanted to be as a human being first, that's really helped to guide me. And even as, tosses and turns and changes the direction of my career, if you can stay true to who you are, that's a big thing. And happily working at EY and getting to meet people like you and ACT, that's been my guiding light, and it's worked really, really well to this day.
Yeah, and it goes back all the way to those family values, those the things that your parents instill in you. And you talk about sport affectionately, and I think sport gives you so much in terms of the discipline of life, and how, as you said, how to interact with people, how to work in a team, how to solve problems quickly together, how to strategize for the future. It gives you so much in terms of life skills that you can take forward. And a lot of the business leaders that I know have had some kind of elements of sport in their background, and they either appreciate it deeply or they've performed at sport at some kind of level. And it's really interesting that you talked a little bit about that. But I mean, obviously, you throughout all of that period, you didn't really have an idea of where you wanted to end up. You've ended up in a big 4 organization, reasonably close to the top of the tree, and it's taken you a number of years to do that through the organization. So, tell us how the EY journey started and why EY, and when you first started, did you actually have those ambitions, or is it something that grew within you as you went through the years of working at the business?
Yeah. So, by any stretch, if you were to throw away my resume, my LinkedIn profile, by any stretch early on, I was an abject failure at this whole career thing. So I can admit that now that it's in the past. But let me give what do I mean by that? I was studying a field that I didn't like. I was studying accounting only because I thought it would be practical. I didn't like it at all. When I first applied to Ernst & Young, to EY for an internship, I was negated. They didn't think I would be here for a long time. So 30 years later, a little vindication there. I started in an industry that I wasn't, in auditing. I worked in financial services that I wasn't exactly crazy about. It just, kind of fell in place. And it really wasn't until I spent a few years, Steve, that I started to think, I really like helping people solve problems, the human element of business. Maybe human resources might be something that I could aspire to. But I will tell you, it was never, I never planned to be on this trajectory. All I was doing is what I said from when I was younger, let me put my head down, work as hard as I can. And the lesson that I learned about that EY story is I did make almost it feels a little bit more haphazard, but it made a really good choice in organizations. And that one thing about EY is they are going to take time studying you and understanding who you are as an individual, and then working really hard to get you in a spot, in a position, in a role that accentuates the things that you do best, the things that are tied into your purpose. And so after doing a few years, I was actually doing well, serving clients and doing audits and working in financial services. But someone pulled me aside and said, "You know what? You may have a career in human resources," which, by the way, was nothing I ever thought about. Like, if you would have asked some of my mates back in school if I should be in human resources, they'd probably say you're a human resources risk more than anything. And But it actually turned out that's my career now. I'm a human resources executive, a recruitment executive, and what I found out, and what the lesson I learned, Steve, was if you do great work at the job you're in, that's the absolute best setup to open opportunities for the next job. And this pertains to athletes. Part of them being great at what they do, those are the skills that are going to carry them into something else. Even if in their minds they don't see a connection there, it's the same thing. And that's what really happened to me. People saw that it was my interpersonal skills, it was ability to solve problems, it was resilience, and they said those are really things that we're looking for in our HR organization. One thing I'll say is that a lot of people, athletes, but also candidates I see, applicants, university hires, they're worried so much about the next thing. What's my next job, the next role, the next promotion, that they don't pay enough attention to what they're doing right now, and it does them a disservice. If you focus on the now and being good at what I'm doing now, that's actually the very best thing you can do for what's next. And by the way, it will probably open up some doors that you're not even aware are out there. And that's exactly what happened to me. I wound up in a career and a role and an industry that I never would have imagined. And by the way, if I would have planned it that way, I probably would have taken lefts and right turns anyway. So my advice there is, do what you do it well, do a great job, and if you're in the right organization, the right environment, you'll find those other things, and that's kind of how it's turned out for me.
Yeah, and the parallels are absolutely stark there between business and sport, and you're absolutely right. Those the organisations that focus on the here and now and getting things right. There's a famous rugby player in the UK who played for the British Lions. He's played in my position as a second row, a big, tall, what many people would say, big, tall, dopey guy who would just lolloped around, which is what I did for most of my career. But he managed to get to the top of the rugby tree and captain the British Lions. And he captained the British Lions in Australia. And on going on that tour, the question was asked, well, how are you going to beat Australia? And it was a very simple answer that came back, but it's so true. And he said, we're going to be the best team at doing the very basics, the very best that we can do them. And if we do the basics, the best we can do them, we're going to beat the opposition. Yeah. So forget all the fancy stuff, forget all the fancy moves, forget it, everything else. If we get all the basics right and we do that better than the opposition, then we're going to win. And that's true in life, and it's true in business. True. And it's, I've taken it into my business life that we focus very much on getting the basics right, treating people the right way, talking to people in the right way, communicating effectively, getting all those foundations right. And, it's held us in good stead. And so that's such a true parallel between sport and business. I think that's why athletes are such good converts to business, because they have all of those innate skill sets that they don't even know about. And part of the skill is trying to get them to understand what those skill sets are. And you've got athletes working at EY now and trying to draw out all of those abilities that they don't even realize they have as a skill in itself. Once they have that realization, the trajectory that you see them go on is massive, and it's not something that they're planning. As you say, they're here and now, and they're getting the basics right, and they're working hard to achieve just the ultimate standards of excellence every day, and be the champion of your day every day, and you'll get somewhere. So how did you find navigating the EY environment? Because it's such a huge business with so many different service lines, people, characters, egos. So how did you manage to navigate all of that? And I've got to say, Dan, there is not one person that I know, inside or outside EY, that has a bad word to say about you. Everyone says you are the nicest person that they know. And so how have you managed to have that aura around you and navigate through the organization that can be, it's pretty ruthless at times. It can be very, very stressful. It can be a lot of pressure, responsibility. How did you find that?
So, wow, that's I don't think you're talking to enough people. If everyone you're talking to thinks I'm the nicest guy, you got to find some new friends, right?
That was your mom I spoke to actually about that. Sorry.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, she has nothing but nice things to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
So look, navigating an organization this large is one thing, but I will also say that navigating any new environment can be daunting, right?
Yeah.
And so whether that's you're going into a new university, you're going into a new role, you're going into a new group of friends, a new situation, all of that can be daunting. But I do think there are a few things that certainly helped me that can help anyone in a transition. First and foremost is reminding yourself, hey, I got here for a reason. There definitely was some, nervousness going into EY, knowing that I went to a state school, maybe not as well known as some other universities in the U.S. I came from a family that didn't have anybody in industry. No, I wasn't like my dad wasn't a businessman, my mom was not. My dad's a welder, my mom was a teacher's assistant. So I definitely had not imposter syndrome, but worries like, hey, am I going to be all right here? Am I going to fit in here? And so navigating early on was more about overcoming that and saying, hey, they selected me, they interviewed me, they saw something in me. Be confident enough, not overconfident, but confident that you have what it takes. It's the same in sport. We're playing the number 1 team, we're the number 3 team, but I know that we can hang with this team, right? It's kind of a similar feeling. From there, once you build enough confidence to go in, getting to know I took 2 directions. First was, let me find other people that I can be helpful to.
Yeah.
So whether that was your direct boss or even like on times outside of my normal working hours, how can I be helpful to other people? Building that brand as someone that, hey, whether it's in my job description or not, I'm going to try to help the best I can. That really helped to build a brand. People knew like, hey, if you go to Dan, even if it's not, he doesn't have time or it's not, he's going to try to help you anyway. So that was number 1. But the other thing was trying to get, understand and make connections with people that were different from you, right? Everyone's got their preference. Like, hey, I'm a numbers guy. I'm a people guy. I love to do this. I love to, work in teams. I prefer to work, solo. And when you actively seek out people that have a different work approach or a different style, that actually is almost as if not more important than gravitating to those people that you have similar to. And by doing that, Steve, I was able to find inroads into other parts of the organization and helping to solve problems in other parts of the organization. Because even if, for example, I hate to be like in the minutia of like email and details, but people that are in that minutia have a lot of data to bring to to bring to the situation. So by befriending them and saying, "Oh, I love that wonkiness. I love your spreadsheet. I love your pivot table." By doing that, it helped me to learn the organization better, but also have inroads into insights that if I had just stayed with the people, like the friendly, outgoing people, I never would have had exposure to that. Yeah. So I guess the takeaway is whether it's a huge, we have 300,000 people at EY globally, or whether it's you're just getting into a new group of 20 or 25, understanding the dynamics and really reaching across the aisle, if you will, to make those connections makes a huge difference in how you fit in the organization, how you understand it, and how you experience it.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the things that we work very hard on with athletes is getting them to get outside of their comfort zone a little bit. And some athletes are used to outreaching and making connections and are very personable, but lots of them aren't. And one of the things that we're really keen on ensuring is that they do network effectively, firstly in their immediate community who they're working with very closely, and then in organizations like EY, you've got to really understand firstly how the business works, and by meeting people you get that knowledge. And then also, if you want a career pathway with that business, the more people you meet, the more doors open up, the more people you can affect. And it's a really effective way of creating a career pathway for yourself. And we've got some great examples of that. I think Olivia Carnegie-Brown was just outstanding at that. And she's moved from the UK to Australia by networking superbly and being able to do that. So as well as being great at what she does, obviously.
Well, right, yeah.
there's a small bit about talent there, but everything else helps, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. Just keeping on the EY theme for the moment and touching on that a little bit further. Obviously, without going over the top, you have been there a long time. What are the biggest changes that you've seen in EY itself or in talent itself over the last 30 years that you've been involved in it, and where do you see it going for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've seen some really great changes, and most of which are bigger organizations and better organizations. And EY is one of them. Shameless plug, right? Like EY is amazing, right? Yeah. But probably the most significant change I've seen over the years is a refocus around the importance of the employee being at the center and being able to build something at the organization. So what do I mean by that? When I started at EY, now it was never said to me this directly, Steve, and but it felt like, hey, we are hiring you to do X. You will do X for as long as we tell you to, at the price that we're gonna, at the salary we're gonna pay you, and you will like it. Go and do your thing. So almost like, and this is not new, it's endemic to EY, that was kind of the work agreement. Hey, we're going to hire you, we're going to give you a job, we'll give you security, we'll give you benefits, just do your job. And that's it. But over the course of the 90s into the early turn of the century, that dynamic started changing, where there was much more power in the hands of the individual employee. It's why unions started. It's why you see a lot of the change in organizations, and happily, the smart employers, EY being one of them, started to recognize, hey, if we don't make more things available for our people to make career choices and make changes and accommodations that will help them to be the best person they can be and employee, they're going to leave. And never has that been more prominent than right now. I mean, we're in the middle of the Great Resignation. People are leaving in droves because they can't. And so the biggest change I've seen is again, people starting to accommodate, okay, we need to be better at, if someone's not happy, if there's something else they want to do, how do we get them that experience? How do we start having that conversation instead of, hey, we'll do it when we're good and ready. Let's make it a joint, effort between the two of us. Now, going forward, I see that going to even a new level, which is, we should not, as an employment, as employers generally, I'm not talking about EY, we should not sit by and wait for employees to tell us, here's what I think I might want to do. We need to be actively engaged in helping to, help our employees find purpose and their best use in whether it's serving internal clients or external clients. And what does that mean? Everyone's worried about, the robots are taking my jobs. No. Let's let the robots take the tasks that you don't want to do anyway, and then really use our time together to be in each other's personal spaces, right? And that includes leveraging technology in the right way. I think that's certainly the way of the future. Probably the best example, Steve, is, so we're looking at now, how do we go out when we have a new job, a new client, a new opportunity? How do we go out to our existing people and say, gosh, I need someone that understands this, that maybe has a couple of years doing, blockchain and understands, the supply chain in healthcare. How do we go out and actively find that someone instead of having to wait for someone to raise their hand or going out into the external market? How do we find our own people that might be good use for that and approach them? And being proactive about making that connection, the needs of the business and the wants of the employee. And I think that's really where the future is going. The companies that can get that right the fastest are going to, because now you're not just in, filling the business need, right? Serving that client, building out the team. You're also fulfilling a personal need of someone who probably wants change, probably never even knew that something was out there and available to them, and helping them to progress their career. So I think the companies that get that right are going to be the ones at the top of the podium. Candidly.
Absolutely. And how big a part do you see personal employee wellness being at the center of that? Is it because I have lots of conversations with athletes when they first join an organization, say, well, I'm expected to work 1 billion hours a week because, if I don't do that, then I'm not going to do the work that I'm supposed to do, be involved in the projects I want to be involved in, and have a career progression. We're like, whoa, if you're working with an organization like EY, there's so much that they put into personal wellness, having a life outside of the organization. I know you're a testament to that, the fact that you're a fireman, that you do your comedy bit as well for charity, you raise funds for charity as well. You're involved in lots of other things outside of the organization. I think that's a really big a big thing for the future, particularly coming off the back of COVID, and everyone's concerned about mental wellness and health, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think one of the unintended positive outcomes of this pandemic that we've gotten through, I think, is that there is more attention being paid to well-being generally, certainly mental health and the like. I think good companies have been thinking about it. I think this is a nice big push to move further along. But it's the same concept. For those of you listening, it's when you're on the plane and they go through the safety, it's the reason they tell you to put your mask on first before helping other people. You are no good to the people around you if you yourself are struggling in any way, physically, mentally, you name it. And so putting a priority, and by the way, it sounds like it sounds like the antithesis of what a leader should do. Don't focus on you, focus on your people. No. If you don't get you right, your people don't get the benefit of the full you.
Absolutely.
And so I'm starting to see a lot more things like that, people paying attention. So at EY, we have a great program where we have access to physical health, whether that's gym memberships and the like. We have a mental health, a full suite of offerings, everything from simple things, Steve. It doesn't have to be like, oh my God, I'm having a breakdown, although some days in the pandemic it feels like that. But things like we have access to meditation opportunities, whether it's online or live or yoga classes, things that can really help people get back into the space that allows them to be their full selves to other people.
Just on that point, Dan, I think it'd be really interesting for people to hear from a senior leader perspective how you've managed COVID, because you've got a lot of responsibility, you've got a lot of people underneath you that you're caring for and trying to bring through this whole pandemic period as well. But how have you personally managed your own self-worth and your own health and wellness? Because every time I speak to you, you're the happiest man in the world. We always have a joke and a laugh. We always have great fun when we're talking about things before we talk about the business stuff. But that can sometimes mask actually where you're at, because that's the kind of person you are. So how have you coped with it, and what strategies have you used to get yourself through what is a stressful period?
Yeah, so it's not always easy, but I would say there are two strategies that I've adopted and have held to religiously that have made the biggest impact in me and being able to be my full self and still enjoy life and try to be successful at business. The first and foremost is I treat the things that are important, my priorities, the same. With the same level of fervor and dedication and focus, whether they're personal or professional. So what I mean by that is if I have scheduled something in my personal life that I'm going to be at my son's baseball game, or I'm going to, I've scheduled for myself to be out and have some time out for my own mental health, and someone comes up and they say, Dan, could you do this? We have a really important thing at work. The answer is no. I already am committed. So that time, that commitment that I've made, either to myself or someone in my family, is every bit as important as the one I've made to work. Now, there will be times, Steve, where work is going to encroach on life, where life is going to encroach on work. But the minute that you start saying it's okay, that prioritizing something from work, quote unquote, an emergency, which it rarely is. The minute you start saying that's okay to encroach on something in your life, you have gone down a path that I see it now. People that I started with 30 years ago, that they have allowed that to happen. Now, work is their life, right? So that's number one. And I go so far as I put it in my calendar. If you looked at my work calendar, it's color coded. It's like, here's personal stuff, here's kids stuff, here's my wife's stuff, here's the firefighter stuff, here's the time for a quick pint. I put that in there. I need a pint. And so that's number one is prioritizing what's important to you and giving equal focus and attention to both your career and the stuff that outside. I think the second thing, which was more of a more recent revelation, probably in the last 5 years, is every great leader and every leader period needs to focus on things that fill their cup. So many people pour themselves into their teams, into their work, into helping other people. You need to make sure that you are surrounding yourself and having enough time with those people and activities that fill your cup. So one of the reasons that we've had such a great relationship is, in addition to the business, I love spending time with you and your brother and ACT. Like that brings me joy most of the time. Right?
Pain the next day, but joy at the time.
That's right. But I find that that sometimes leaders are so selfless in helping other people that they forget that you don't have an unlimited battery bank.
No.
You got to recharge. And so for me, that's getting on the bike and doing a few miles on the bike, or getting to the gym. It's going out and meeting my friends for an evening out, at least once a week or once every couple of days or whatever. Those are the kinds of things that if you don't make time for to fill your own cup, you're going to have less to give out to other people.
Absolutely.
And I got to say, Steve, it felt selfish at first.
Yeah.
Like if I was going, I've got 2 kids, I got a fabulous wife, and it's like, I need to go and have a drink with the boys. But it was, but I come back and I'm a better man for it. Well, not that night, but the next day I'm a better man for it. So those are the kinds of things that I think people can forget to prioritize, that need to be prioritized.
Absolutely. And I think I think that you're absolutely true to that in terms of how you behave, how I've seen you behave as well, and you do segment your time in the right way, and you commit to that as well. When I've never had you miss a meeting with us. commit to everything you do with us. And I know that everything you do in your personal life, you commit to fully, and that's testament to you as a person, Dan. But I think just going back to where we started in our relationship 5 years ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago, we both knew a wonderful lady called Shirley Jackson. Shirley was the reason that we started the Olympic program with EY. And we went to Rio, and we created a great program off the back of Rio. And then Shirley retired, and you came in off the back of her success and glories. And we were, at the time, myself and Andy hadn't met you. We didn't know who you were. Really, we'd read a lot about you, heard lots of great stories about you. But we found about 5 or 6 months into your starting your new role at EY, and we hadn't had a meeting with you. And we were like, does this guy not want to get involved with us? What's going on? He doesn't like us. Has he heard the rumours? What's going on? And we didn't quite appreciate at the time just how busy you were, and you were on a whistle-stop tour of the world, and you were doing so many things, seeing all of the recruiters that were then underneath you and that you were responsible for. So what was it that you looked at in terms of the athlete transition program at EY that we'd started before you took that role, that really you found as a compelling story to continue the program, not just for another Olympic cycle to the Winter Olympics, but continuing going on now? So what was it about the program that you thought, do you know what, I can really get myself behind that, and I want to make sure that that's something that has longevity?
Yeah. Well, look, there were a few things that really, in my mind, I made up my mind, we're going to make this priority. First and foremost was what you created with ACT. Candidly, when you have people that have been through it as athletes themselves, that understand what it's like to make that transition, there was an authenticity and genuineness that to be frank, you don't always find in people trying to sell you business, right? In outside consultants and providers, et cetera. But from the minute that I started having conversations with you, I was like, wow, these guys really get it. The organization understands. They understand the athletes in a way that most people never will. And so that authenticity was kind of, the first thing that pulled me in. From there, I saw, boy, this is such a huge benefit to EY. When people talk about diversity and diversifying their workforce, automatically what comes to mind in a lot of people's minds as well, that's there's gender, there's ethnicity, some of the more traditional diversity, but for EY we're so focused on something much broader. We need diversity of thought, we need diversity of background. And so case in point, we have a whole program around hiring neurodiverse people, so people on the autism spectrum come and work at EY because they have a very unique skill set that we can bring to bear in such a beautiful way. And I saw this program as something like that. There was this whole untapped group of people that we could bring into the firm and bring their great talents to bear. Athletes, because we've seen it. We've seen not professional athletes, but even just everyday athletes and what they bring to the table. But there was a missing link, Steve. It was, okay, we could do that, but how are we going to take someone that's at the top of their game, literally in sport, and have them feel like they can be successful in this whole new environment? And that's where the relationship, for me, I saw the huge value. That transition, what you offer in terms of the coaching, the psychometric understanding, the helping with the placement and getting it just right, that high touch, because it's not just about hiring people, it's about getting them in and having them be productive and successful. And when I saw that you could offer that, I was like, that's something I can't do, that's something we can't do internally, that's something we need to do. And that really got us down the path, and just we haven't looked back since.
We haven't, no. It's been an amazing journey. We've got so many success stories to talk about, too many to mention, and people can go and find the success stories on the ACT website, and the link will be on this podcast content later on. But just in terms of the biggest challenges for businesses bringing in and hiring athletes, what do you see those as?
I think there's a few of them. The most obvious one that I've come across is, well, they don't have the background that we're looking for, right? People are looking to see a specific CV with a certain level of education or experience doing X, Y, and Z. And so understanding that the competencies and the transferable skills, understanding that at a deeper level, that's a challenge to wrap someone's head around, especially if they're used to, hey, I've always hired someone that with this degree from this university with 8 years of experience at this kind of company, and they've always worked out. Well, that doesn't mean that someone doesn't have all those things won't also work out. And getting someone comfortable with that's so that's a lot of internal conversations that need to happen, but that's always been a challenge. I think the other thing is helping to make sure that the athletes feel comfortable and confident they can come in and do this. These people that are gold medalists and world champions step into EY saying, "Oh, I'm not sure if I," kind of like your Nancy story, right? They're feeling a little intimidated. I'm like, you have no idea what you're going to be able to do. It's incredible. So building that confidence, even the confidence to apply. Mm-hmm. I think if you talk to a lot of athletes today and say, "You want to work at EY?" They're like, "What's that? I'm not quite sure what that is." Yeah. Or much less whether how I'd fit into the organization. So building out that confidence and generating in that community, in the athlete community, here's what we do, here's where you could fit, here are some opportunities for you. And again, that's another thing our partnership has helped us to do, is to get that word out. We're not your mom and dad's tax shop. We do lots of things that you could bring your unique skill set to. So I think if you can get through those things, getting the business comfortable, like, hey, this is a little different what you're used to, but not worse different. In fact, maybe better different. And then also letting the athletes know, hey, there's something out there for you if you just kind of suspend some of your what you don't know and think about it, what you could do. There could be a real win there.
Absolutely. And just on that better different tag that you just said there, what do you see as the most sort of impactful transferable skill sets that athletes have in abundance that sometimes your regular candidates don't have?
Yeah, it's certainly it's the resilience is always right up there with me. Mm-hmm. Every athlete at any level, like at this level of sport, has been through their set of, whether it's setbacks, whether it's injury, whether it's losses, not making teams, etc., and have bounced back to get to where they are today. So that in an industry, in a business, in the business world where there's constant challenges and failures, no one talks about that, but we fail all the time. Mm-hmm. It's being able to come back and learn from that failure that athletes do better than just about any other group of individuals I know. I think another thing is their interpersonal skills. And even if you're say an individual sport like fencing or something like that, being able you're part of a team. It's your coaching staff. It's your strength training. It's the it's the Olympic team that you're on. All these other things. Being able to interact with that many different people, knowing that your individual success is tied to a bigger group of people, whether you're in a group, team sport or not. Knowing that and knowing that you all have to be successful for you to be successful, that is a core tenet that sometimes is lost on quote unquote regular employees. So I find they come with that. And then last, of course, is the leadership bit, right, Steve? This is no secret to anyone. People that can come in and manage a sport or what have you at that high level tend to do very, very well working in teams and leading teams. And we've seen that play out time and time again as we've hired athletes at the firm.
You're absolutely right, and I think we don't have enough time actually to talk about all of the transferable skill sets that athletes can bring to the table, and you've hit on probably two of the most important ones there. Look, we're getting to the top of the hour, Dan. I know that your time is very precious, and you've got to shoot to something else after this. But let's have a little bit of fun before you go. So look, at the weekend, last weekend, I went to the opera. I went to the opera for the very first time. I took my wife. It was her birthday. She'd never been to the opera either. We went to a little seaside town down in the south of England called Brighton. And it was a sunny weekend, funnily enough, in October in the UK. I'm not sure how it was sunny, but it was. And we had the best time. We had an amazing time. And we sat on the seafront and we had moules and frites, pretending we were in France. But we didn't. We weren't. But what I'd like to hear from you, because I know you are a comedian, I would like to hear your best funny story or your best funny experience that you can leave the listeners with.
Wow. Okay. So I'll keep it recruiting related since that's my role. And I have a number, as you can imagine. I've recruited and hired tens of thousands of people over the year, and I have some doozies. But one that stands out that I'll leave you all with. So because it speaks to some of the competencies we were talking about. So I was interviewing at a university here in the States. And we were interviewing in their career services office of this university, and I was meeting students. And this one guy comes in, and he is super nervous, Steve. Like he is beyond nervous. His palms are sweating. He's a young student. He really wants to work at EY, and so we strike up a good rapport. I'm trying to get him to calm down, and he is, and he's doing a great job. He's answering the questions. Now, where this particular interview room was in the basement of this career services office, and so there were no windows to the outside. And so we're about 20 minutes into the interview, and all of a sudden, power is lost. So, I mean, we are now in the middle of him answering a question in the pitch pitch black. I can't see my hand 2 inches, in front of my face. I don't know, and it is like it's a little scary, right? All of a sudden, I'm in this room with this stranger, right? And I can only imagine now. I'm worrying what this kid is feeling like because he was nervous enough. Now we're sitting in the pitch black. He was just in the middle of the answer, and about 7 or 8 seconds go by, and it feels like an eternity. We're like, okay, what happens now? All of a sudden, I hear a little click, and he has a lighter, like a cigarette lighter, that he lights up. And he just continues on with the rest of his response. And we did the rest of the interview like that. It was like a seance. And he didn't address it. He didn't say anything about the blackout. He just kept going as if nothing happened.
Oh, brilliant.
And he did great. He got the job. He came to work at EY, and every time I saw him, I would make a little lighter, with my, and I was like, "Hey, you're all lit up," and it was just so funny. So, it was a great story because he didn't. First of all, it was hysterical, but he didn't skip a beat. And being able to think on your feet like that, and then just say, "Hey, I'm getting through this. I don't care what it takes," was really something very special, very funny.
Dan, that's amazing. Listen, you've been an absolute star. The time has flown by. I'm not sure where it's gone, but thank you so much for spending this time with me. And I'll see you very, very soon. I'm going to turn the podcast off now. Listen, everyone who's listening, love yourself first, because if you can't love yourself first, how can you expect anyone else to love you? I've been Steve Moore. You've been listening to the Human Athlete Podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today on the Human Athlete Podcast. To learn more, we invite you to visit www.athletecareertransition.com. See you next time.